So first things first, I want to show everybody how to go ahead and submit your homework and how to name it and to go through all of that. So I need everybody to jump on some computer, either the ones here at school or your own laptop ones. Hopefully, how is he? Good, good. Is it bad?
No, just the whole system's bad.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it is.
Oh, no. I mean, the minute you go to, like, I'm guessing emergency room, you just, it's anybody's guess how many hours you're going to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, here I am.
Anyway, on a happier note, Paige, you do me a favor and start me a sign in, thanks. Okay, so how to submit homework. So first things first, how to name your stuff. So I'm going to just go in and take a look at a sample, and I'll show you how I would actually redo mine. So this is the assignment folder right here. This was the stuff that you were supposed to be making. I think the first one called, actually, hang on one second. Yeah, you were supposed to be making custom profiles for assignment 2.1, right? Okay, so you had to find where they were. Did everybody look and see the whole tree, the place where all the profiles were? Everybody was able to find their profiles? All right, I'm going to see if I can do mine from memory. So for me anyway, I go to, again, if you click on your go down folder, you don't have library in here. This is for Macintosh only. Windows people, it should be easier because I don't think your folder is hidden, but in Macintosh it is. If I hold down the shift key, nothing happens. If you have an older Mac, holding down the shift key gives you the library. If you hold down the option key on the newer ones, you actually do get the library right here. This is a user library. What can get really confusing, and I just want to point this part out so that everybody realizes that there is a pitfall to avoid. If we take a look at my root, so this would actually be considered my root right here, my Macintosh HD, you will see that inside that there is this folder called Library. Now this library is for all users. It's not for you in particular. So if you should know by now anyway that you can have multiple users on a computer and they all have their own separate login. And so when one person logs in, they get all of their preferences and all their applications and all their documents that are all set up. If they log out and then someone else logs in, it's all of their stuff anyway. So this library right here deals with everybody. It's still not the place to put your stuff, but that's where this is. So anything that you have done individually is not going to show up here because it's in your personal library. To make things even more confusing, if you click on the system folder in here, they also have a library in here. This library is considered system-wide, and this is really more of a sacred place. The only people who really should be mucking around in here really are system administrators and Apple, that kind of stuff. So your library, again, if we click on users, you don't see it in here. You've got to do this whole go menu trick. But if you do the go menu trick, hold down the option key and click on the library, it will actually show up right here. If you then hover over the word that says library up at the very top, you'll see you get a little icon. You can click and drag that icon over into your favorites sidebar and simply let go. I've already got mine there. And this way it's just a faster way to get to this is always going to be your personal library, and so you can get to it, and that's great. So for me, there's always two places that this stuff exists. So I'm looking again to get my the profiles that I made, the D&G color calibration profiles that you made for assignment 2.1. That's what we're actually looking for here. So the only two places in this folder that matter are the application support folder and then the preferences folder, which is way down here. I'm fairly certain that this is in the application support folder, so I'm going to click on application support. I'm going to then go to Adobe. Inside of Adobe, I'm going to go to Camera Raw. Inside of Camera Raw, right here are your camera profiles. These are the custom profiles. And you can see they all have a little DCP that actually follows them. The trick to this is, I'm going to move this a little bit to the side. I'm going to hide everybody else. The trick to this is that if you take one of these profiles and you pull it out, I'm going to take mine, just this one right here. I'm going to drag it out of my folder and put it on the desktop. If you do that, you see what happens is that it actually removes it from your camera profile folder. That means you can't use it anymore. And I've got a copy of it that's out here. So instead, what you want to do, I'm going to return this back to where it was. If you then drag it out and hold down your Option key instead, you'll see that you get this little green plus. And what that's telling us is that this is actually making a copy of the profile. And so now when you do that, you didn't lose the one that's actually in the camera profiles folder, which is where you need it in order to work with it. You've actually got a copy of it sitting right out here. So I think the way the assignment reads is that I don't necessarily want you to rename these. What I would want you to do instead, because again, the name of these profiles is really important. So if you rename this profile to actually be your last name plus the assignment number, it's great for the assignment. And if you've done that, that's fine. You can go ahead and turn it in. But just realize is that the name of the profile is how you keep track of what images you want to apply, what profile you want to apply, which profile you want to use for which images. So they're very specific. So instead of actually changing that, what you could simply do is create a new folder. So I'm just going to create a new folder in my system. Let me get rid of these guys. So I'm just going to create a new folder on my desktop. It's right here. I'm going to name the folder using our assignment naming convention. So in our case, my last name is Engelhard, so I would type in, sorry, you would think I could spell, wouldn't you? Engelhard underscore 2.1. And then simply put, it's interesting when you do the 2.1 on your desktop, it thinks that this is an extension. So anyway, simply drag that profile and the other three that you made into this folder, and then this folder is the one that you'll actually submit. Now, in the case of the second assignment, assignment 2.2, you are actually creating images for that. So let me go find one of those. You could do the same trick. If you don't want to rename the image files, you can actually put them into a folder and then tag the folder using our naming convention. So that would look like this. I think hopefully I've developed some of these myself. So yeah, let's just say it's this image right here again, or this group of images right here. So I'm going to grab all the, there's two DNGs in here. So I'm going to grab both of these. And this is, so I'll show you both of the ways of doing it. So first off, I'm going to make a folder again on my desktop. And I'm going to, again, name it using the assignment convention for this. So Engelhard underscore 2.2. And then you can simply grab both of those images and drag them into this 2.2 folder. Again, I'm going to hold down the Option key to make a copy so that I don't lose the originals that are back in my folder that's over here. Hold down the Option key. Sorry, let's try that again because mine did not carry over. And it's still not dragging them into that folder. Try them one at a time. There they go. So they're both in here. So you could do that and then just submit that folder and we'll be fine. Otherwise, what you could do is, again, I'm going to rename the individual files. So I'm going to start with the first one at the top and I'm going to call it, again, my last name, underscore, and then it would be assignment 2.2. But then again, you've got 4 images now that are going to be part of this assignment 2.2. So you would do another dot with a 1, and that way I'll know it's the first image. And then on the second one, you would name it. again, your last name, ENGLHARD underscore 2.2.2 because it's the second image. And then the third image would be 2.2.3, and the fourth image would be 2.2.4, and on and on and on. Does that make sense, everybody, what's going on here? So it's just a way that you're actually tagging it with your last name and the assignment number. So when they're groups, you can put them all into a folder if you want and just tag the folder, or if they're individual images and you want to just turn in individual images, that's fine. Just tag the difference between image 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or however many there are. There's not that many assignments where there's multiple images, so that part won't actually matter. So this is how you do the naming convention, and you can do it right now if you'd like to, or just realize that we've got all of class now for you to finish renaming your assignments correctly and actually putting them up on our server. Okay, so then to get to the server, all of you went through this experience in our very first class. Hopefully everyone remembers how to do it. If you don't remember how to do it, go to our first session. So it would be our session number 1. The class is your student files from week number 1, and there are 2 PDFs in here. The first PDF is how to connect to the class projects via Macintosh. The second one is how to connect to that same place via Windows. You simply go through that whole process again to connect to our server. If you're on the computers that are right here, the ones that are the school's computers, if you take a look at the dock down at the, I think the dock is at the bottom on these computers, but wherever the dock is, whether it's on the bottom or the right or left side, inside that dock there will be an icon that looks like a white cube with a blue apple on the top of it. If you click on that, it is simply an alias link to our server, and it should take you right there. For everyone else, the first time you log in, it should require you to put in your password, your username, which again is the same thing that you would use to log into one of these or to log into your email account here or your wireless network here. It's all the same. It's your username, which is your email address, and your password. Hopefully once you do that the first time, it's not going to require that again and again and again. So for the Macintosh people, the easiest way to get there is to, again, click on the Go menu. So I'm in the Finder again, click on the Go menu, and come down and do Connect to Server. And hopefully everybody actually did the connection here to the server in our first class, and it will remember the server that you tried to connect to. So if you don't, does everybody have this, or does anybody need the address of this server? So just in case you do need it, I'll read it out really quickly. It is, again, A as in Apple, F as in Frank, P as in Paul, all lowercase, / / 172.20.208.221. If before you click connect, you then click on this little plus right here, mine's not active because I've already got one right here, it will copy all that information and just keep it for you as a favorite right down here, so that from this point on, you don't actually have to remember that number. You simply click on the favorite and it will load it for you up into the server place to connect, and then you simply click on connect. Now again, if this is your first time, at this point it should ask you for your password, and it should ask you for your username and your password. You would have to put that stuff in. But once you get there the first time, hopefully it will remember that part. If you take a look at the server itself, it's named TKAL, T-I-K-A-L. That's what you'll see on your desktop if you have preferences set on your desktop to actually show you the network servers that are connected. However, inside that server, there are subservers or subfolders. You're looking for the class project partition of that server. Click on class projects, and inside that, you will find there are files for folders for every, not every, but most of the instructors, certainly all the instructors in the photo department. You're going to look for the folder that has my last name on it, Engelhard, E-N-G-E-L-H-A-R-D. If you click on that, it will actually open up, and inside that folder are 3 folders. One is delete. You don't ever need to deal with that. That's just stuff I can't throw away, so it's a place that I park stuff I can't throw away. There's Dropbox. This is where you do want to actually drop your stuff. And then there's finally resources. This is where I actually, you have access to the resources stuff so that you can copy stuff off of this that I'm trying to get out to you and you can use. So what you are going to do is you're going to click on Dropbox and you're going to take all of your assignment folders. I've got 2 of them right now. So I'm going to click my Engelhard 2.1 folder and my Engelhard 2.2 folder, and I'm going to click and, drag them onto the Dropbox and let go. Now, in my case, you can actually see inside of that folder. In your case, you cannot see inside of that folder. And the reason they have it set up that way is that they don't want to give anybody except for me access to those folders, because these are where your assignments go. And it's conceivable that somebody who has a grudge against you today is going to go in and fuck with your folders, and that would be, well, depending on what you did to them, either justified or not. But at any rate, at the end of every class, I will show you what's on, because you can see there's folders that are already populating right now. At the end of the class, I will actually show this, especially if somebody reminds me to show you this, what's inside of here, just so that you make sure that your files for your assignments actually got there. Make sense? We good? Yes? Let me see what you... Yeah. No, yeah, whatever it is.
And I keep trying to put in my password.
And it doesn't like it?
So, it's the password for the school, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's whatever you would use to log into this.
Yeah, it's like not working.
Okay, so plan B. If this, and now we'll figure this out. We should just talk to Mimi about that. She does really magic shit with this. But we need to get that resolved, because it's going to be a pain in the ass for you to do. Not just this class, but everything, right?
Yeah.
So we'll get it worked out. So plan B, yes?
Mine says the Dropbox doesn't have a permission.
Is anybody else getting a permission error?
Yeah, it won't let me, it has like a circle with a line. It won't let me like drag my stuff.
Anybody else? Okay, Windows or Mac?
Mac.
And you're doing the schools, right?
Yeah.
And you're doing your own laptop, right?
Oh, no, I'm doing my own.
Oh, okay, you're doing your own laptop. Okay. To get around that temporarily, this is the temporary fix around this. So how many of you guys use file transfer services? Dropbox, anybody? Yeah. Google Drive, another way of doing it, right? Do not use either one of those for this class. They are a pain in the ass. So you put something on Google Drive and you send it to me. I get the link and I click on the link and it says, well, you need permission to do this, which then sends you an email saying he needs your permission. It's a huge pain in the ass. So instead, this is what I want you to do. This is the only transfer service to use because it's really fast. So for you guys right now, this is the easiest way to submit your homework. So go to a browser. And type in from smash, FROMSMASH. There may be language in here. No, it's just from smash.com. This is the best file transfer service that I work with. It's the fastest. There is a 2 gigabyte limit on here. Go ahead and say you accept it. Sometimes it'll actually ask you, do you want to use the free version or the paid version? The free version is just got a 2 gigabyte limit, so anything that's over that, so let's say you have 4 gigabytes worth of files, just do 2 transfers. Break it into part 1 and part 2. You won't have that much, at least certainly not for this first assignment. But anyway, put all of them into a folder, and you can actually drag. It says right here to do a long press on your drag. A lot of times if I'm using Smash, I'll actually just zip them all together, so I'm only putting up one file that contains everything. That's fine. So here, I'll show you what it looks like. You simply do a drag and drop. So hang on one sec. Let's go back to my desktop, and I'll just take a single file. You simply drag and drop it on top of it, and once you do, it'll come up. It's already sitting right there. It'll say, What's your email? Go ahead and put in your email. Mine would be jenglehart@clum.com. J-E. And who it's going to, I'm going to send this to my another personal email.
I have a question.
Shoot.
For the dodge and burn files,
Yeah?
do we want those in the 2.2?
No, those are going 2.3, or be named 2.3, and then the last one, it's either 2.3 or 2.4. I forget which one the castle is. The castle that we did last week is one of them as well. So, yeah.
And are we still renaming them after we put them in a folder, or is it okay?
No, if it goes into a folder that has the assignment number on it, you're good.
Okay.
It's just, and the thing is that again, the majority of what you turn in this class is going to be single images, and then you just name it using your name and the assignment number. Anyway, and then you would put in the subject matter here. So I would call this assignment week 2, because it would be all of them. And then I would just say, Verser, you are amazing. And hit send. And it'll go through this whole quick little rigmarole. You'll see it actually launch the whole thing. So mine's actually already done the transfer, and you can view it if you would like to. This would be a download link right here to it. So if you want to copy this link, you could send it to anybody else that you wanted to. But I will get an email with this link and saying, okay, blah, 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 and I'll simply download the file and we'll be good to go. Questions about this? So a lot of people also use WeTransfer. It's very similar to this thing right here, except that it takes 10 times as long to upload and to download. This is definitely the service to use. Any questions? Okay. I need to make a quick note about permission error. Do me a favor, will you? Can you send me a quick email telling me, because I need to know if anybody's having permission issues with dropping their files on the Dropbox, please send me an email so that I can then send IT an email and get this whole thing fixed. Because it's so much easier than doing all this transfer mess. Make sense? We good? Okay. So for everybody else, if you did get your welcome tablet, hopefully you brought it. I'm sorry I sent that email out with very little notice, but nonetheless, hopefully you do have your tablet here or a tablet here. I need everybody to go ahead and take their tablet out and plug it in. You also need to plan on bringing your tablet every single class that we work in this for the rest of the semester, except for your the very final class. We won't need it for your final critique of your final projects. We won't need it for that, but for everything else, please do bring it. And just go ahead and get it set up in the very beginning. When you show up, just go ahead and plug it in. So how many of you guys have never worked with a graphics tablet before? Okay, the lion's share of you. Okay, so it's a little awkward getting started with it because basically you're looking at a screen and you're doing something in a completely different place. All I can say is that most everyone who raised their hands actually looks like they wear glasses. You know, when you first got your glasses, they seemed like really kind of weird, especially if you have like bifocals or progressives or that kind of shit. It's like, oh my God, right? It's like you're a little bit drunk. But 2 weeks later, it's like you don't even know they're there. The very same thing will happen with your graphics tablet. So spend time with it, spend time using it. I'm going to show you when you would want to use it, when you don't. There are cases of stuff that we do in Photoshop that you actually do not want to use a graphics tablet for it. But especially when we get into doing the retouching part of this class, which happens, so it happens relatively quickly. You can't do the work that we do in this class without using a graphics tablet. If you try to use it using a mouse or a trackpad or something like that, it will break you. I can promise you that. It will absolutely break you. Graphics tablet is the only way you can do that kind of work. So spend time with it. You'll get used to it. I see some people who try to move that forward even faster, and they'll use a graphics tablet to do, to go online and do, and surf the web and do that kind of stuff, whatever. You can try that. I don't know how much help it'll really make for you, but you can try it. So I don't know that I would necessarily suggest it, but it certainly won't hurt, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Now, this is actually one of 4 or 5 tablets that I've got. This is the Wacom. It's the smallest of the Intuos models. They have other ones that are for like kids and stuff. You'll see if you do a search on Amazon, which is usually where I get this stuff. They're Wacom tablets that are, they have, what was the purple dinosaur? Barney. They'll have like Barney on it and that kind of stuff, because they're meant to be playful. They're meant to, for you to be able to draw and that kind of stuff. And that's great. I don't think I would get the Barney one. If Barney is your thing, I wear it, own it, be proud. Walk in, show everybody your Barney thing, Anyway, this is the one that I use. I'm a big believer in refurb stuff. I buy refurbished cameras. I don't buy refurbished lenses. Those are the only things I don't buy that are refurbed. This Wacom tablet is a refurb tablet. They have 2 versions of the smallest one here. One is wired and one is wireless. So this is a Bluetooth one. You can use the Bluetooth one wired if you want, but anyway, I prefer this kind. I got it for like $60, something like that. Do not buy a graphics tablet right now. Do the work in this class, see what it does for you, and then make your decision. But it's Michael, right? Yeah. I was telling Michael, I was teaching at the Art Institute summer, like 3 or 4 summers ago, actually right before the pandemic started. And they had like 30 of these, 40 of these, whatever, to use for their classes, and they got rid of all of them. And in their place, Wacom actually makes a version of a tablet that has an LED screen on it. So you're not looking at a computer screen at all. You're actually looking at the LED screen and you work right on it. But it's giant. It's like this big, right? And it takes 1,000 cables. It needs its own power brick. It needs its own power source. It needs to communicate to your computer and also back from your computer back to it. So to set this thing up, it comes in like a briefcase that you open up, and then you spend an hour setting it all up and getting it all ready to go, whatever. And it's just this giant thing. If it falls on your foot, it'll break your foot. Or you pull this out of your backpack, you punch the button, and you're ready to go. I don't know. But the reason I bring this up is that everybody asks me, so should I get the big one, the medium one, the small one? The truth of the matter is, in retouching for photography, you work on an extremely small space. You do not need a giant tablet to do this kind of work, the kind of work that you'll do in retouching. However, that's very different if you're an illustrator, or if you're a painter, or if you're somebody who needs to do big, broad brushstroke gestures like this, you need the real estate to do that on. If you do it on something very small, it'll happen way too fast for you, because this tablet maps to your computer screen. But for us, it doesn't matter. Again, you're working primarily in the center of this tablet on a very, very small area. You're not doing those big, grand gestures. So it's less overhead, it's cheaper, it's all the above. So just keep that in mind when you decide what you're going to get. Okay. To continue on that, if you've got your tablet plugged in, the wireless model, there is no on-off switch, I don't think. The Bluetooth version, like I do, does have an on-off switch, so mine's now turned on. To actually adjust this, if you're on Windows, you need to go to your control panels. I think that's where they have it, so it'll be under device control. You can also do a search in your search bar for Wacom, and it should actually show up. You can ultimately wind up with this. So I've quit mine right now, but I'm going to launch it again. Wacom now installs an application. Nobody uses it, but they've done one anyway. And if we actually take a look at it, the Wacom Desktop Center, you'll actually see that it'll give you a little information about your tablet. It'll say, okay, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. If you cannot get to the settings where I'm going to show you to actually do the settings, it's conceivable that you could come down here and do some of the settings down here. but nobody that I know really uses this stuff, so I just wanted to point out that it's there. Instead, if you're on Macintosh, again, if you're on Windows, you need to go to your device control panels to actually find this, and I'm fairly certain it's there, but in Macintosh, if you click on the Apple menu, come down to System Preferences. This would be for everybody who has not upgraded to Ventura. Ventura is the latest operating system, although they're getting ready to drop another one right now, and I can't remember what the next greatest one's called. Again, we talked about this last week. I strongly suggest you do not be a beta tester for Apple. Do not upgrade your OS to the latest, greatest. Stay one behind. Let everybody else do the troubleshooting for you, and then when they move on to a next one, so let's say they're at 10, when they move to 11, you stay on 10, let everybody beta test 11, and then when they go to 12, you can go to 11. If you're always one behind, you'll only always have the most stable, greatest, best version that they could ever make of that OS. You'll be happier. So anyway, if you're on Ventura, this is called System Settings now. You would click on the same thing, and on ours, the simplest one is if once you get it up on System Preferences, at the very bottom, they're cordoned off, so the preferences that are user are at the very bottom. You would click on Wacom Tablet. It'll open up a screen, and it says no Wacom device is selected here. Mine's actually, my Bluetooth had turned off, so I'm just turning my Bluetooth back on. So, does everybody have this showing? Who can get to it? Okay. At the very top, you'll see that there are applications. You can actually set your tablet up to do different things for different applications. Now for me, that gets really confusing, so I do not do that. I leave this on all other applications. I never add another application. But let's say, for instance, you do work in Illustrator and you want it to function differently than the work you do in Photoshop. You simply click on the plus button up at the very top, and you can add any application that supports tablets. And then you would click on that application and configure it the way you wanted to configure it, and then go back to all other applications and configure that one the way you want to. But in our case, I'm only going to do the other applications. Then there's tabs that are underneath this, and we start with the tablet tab. So if you click on the tablet part, this tablet is actually designed, let me see if I can get this a little bit bigger. What's it saying to you? Oh, it's saying it can't find it. This is probably an indication. The security part. Okay, I can't actually get yours, but I'm gonna try, and I think I can do this part from memory. So typically when you installed the software, if there were security issues, you would get that. This is more specific to Apple than it is to Windows. But what they're worried about is that you've got some rogue software that you've actually installed. So the trick to allow it to actually work is come up to the System Preferences again. Hang on one second. I'm going to close up my Wacom one really quick. So go to System Preferences. Inside of System Preferences, you'll find a security and privacy preference or setting. Click on that. When you click on this part, the first thing you need to do is unlock this. So at the very bottom, there's a lock. If you click on the lock, it's going to ask you for your password. I will go ahead and put mine in, or your thumbprint, or however you actually unlock that. Once you get this unlocked, you want to go to the Privacy tab up at the very top. Then. Is anybody else having this issue? Okay, then I'm just going to run it through you really quickly. Okay, yeah, so you're on the latest, greatest, newest part. Okay. So, actually, let's go up more to the top part of it. Yeah, so you're just going to, the things that I'm going to show you right here, you can pick them right here.
Okay.
So this is the tab that I have to go to the other one for. Okay. So once you get into Privacy tab, and I typically do this for all of them, but Aaron, I'm going to try to keep this to a dull roar for you. So hang on one second. Yeah, so I don't think you need to do location services. You don't need to do contacts, calendars, reminders, photos, camera, microphone, speech, accessibility. Click on, do you have an accessibility tab? Click on that guy, and what we're looking for is a way for you to actually add applications to it. And in my case, if for me to add the Wacom tablet driver right here, I would click on this plus, and then a screen will, well here, I'll go ahead and click on this plus. It lets you navigate to stuff, and you would actually want to look for and find your Wacom tablet driver. So I would come down to here under Wacom tablet, and I would click on the possibly the desktop utility part. Do you see, is there anywhere in there you can find Wacom? If it's Wacom tablet driver, that's what you really are looking for.
I don't have the Wacom tablet driver.
What do you have?
I just have the Wacom Center, Wacom display settings, and the Wacom tablet utility.
Do a search
this
for
thing?
Wacom.
I have the.
Yeah, I know. You got that part right there. Oh, let's just go ahead and click on Wacom Center, see what happens, and just it's not going to do any damage. It may not give you the permission that you're trying to get, but that's not it. We're not finished. So then, as you come down, input monitoring. I'm fairly certain you also need to add it there, and it would be the same trick. Click on the plus.
I have it here.
Does it say Wacom tablet driver? Yep, that's where you need to click on it then. You don't need it for full disk access, for files, screen recording, no. No, that should actually do it. Close that guy up, and then see if you can get to it in your system preferences. Again, see if the Wacom tablet shows up. It may require a computer restart. Do you still get that same security warning message? Oh, sorry.
I didn't get it. I did try again and it didn't pop up, so.
Oh, good. Do you have the preferences now that you can change?
I think it should all be good.
Okay. So go to your system settings again then, and somewhere in there should be Wacom. No, you can get out of this part. You need to go back to the general settings. Oh, yeah, sorry. So go down. It's going to be probably down at the very bottom. Yep. Oh, shit.
Oh.
Oh, maybe not. See what happens if you click on center?
Should I do that?
Yeah. It may be forcing you to do it through here. So hopefully this is going to be similar, but you and I can look at this during the break and just to make sure. Okay. Because it looks like at the very least, do you have your stylus?
Yeah.
Take your stylus. Does your stylus work? Yep, your stylus works because at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. Okay, so for everyone else, you can actually see there on my tablet, and this will map differently for different ones, there's a series of buttons that run along the very top. You guys should have those as well. You can configure those buttons to do certain things, and there's a drop-down menu to allow you to configure it. So you can actually use one as a modifier for your keyboard, as a modifier for, in my, this is set up to actually do shift key, to all of that kind of stuff. You can actually, this is a control key, a command key. You can do all of that kind of stuff. I don't use any of this stuff. If you want to use it, great. I don't use any of it. However, if we take a look down here, this part's all good. I'm going to click on the options part right here. You don't need to change anything in the options part that's at the bottom of that. We need to now go to the next tab over, the one that says pen. This one actually does matter. So if you take your stylus, if you look at your stylus first, if this is supposed to represent a regular pen, there is a pointy end on one side and there's a blunt end on the other side. One of the first mistakes that most people make is that instead of actually putting the pen down using the pointy side, they actually have it upside down and you're using the eraser side, and your tablet will not work. And you go, why won't my tablet work? And it's because you're just holding it upside down. It's the wrong one. 99.99999% of what we do in here is going to be with the stylus part, the pointy part. If you look right above that stylus pointy part, there is a rocker switch. There's basically, it's a switch that there is a larger button and a smaller button, and they just rock back and forth. You can actually use those buttons to do things like right clicks for mouse. You can configure what those buttons do. I don't ever use the buttons either. Now, that's not to say that you aren't going to want to do that part, whatever. It's just I don't find the need for all of that kind of stuff. It's just easier for me to actually hold down a keyboard shortcut than it is to actually program this stuff to my stylist. But you guys are going to have your own life as you start working with these tablets, and the way you choose and want to work with it is yours. It's a way to individualize this stuff. I'm just telling you, you don't need to use these buttons. I don't use them, and I do a ton of work with this tablet. So just to throw that part out there. However, so if you click on your drop-down menu right here, you can see it's what's controlling the very top button right here. My top button is configured to do a right click, which gives you drop-down menus, stuff like that. It's a right click comes from the Windows world. The bottom one is a scroll button. That's just how it's set up by default. But you can change that. You can say, oh, well, you know, I would really rather use that as a double click. I would rather set that button so that when I click on that, it launches a file. So this is entirely up to you, however you want to actually work with this. What is important to you, though, is to take your stylus in now and actually press it down on your tablet, and you will actually see that you get a pressure sensitivity readout. You'll see mine, I'm just clicking on it right here. And what this is that the default of this pressure setting, it's called tip feel right here, is set right in the middle. You can actually change this to say, I want mine to be much firmer. And when you set it up to firm, it means you have to press considerably harder to get it to slide all the way over. What we're really dealing with here is that how much, the thing about Wacom tablets that makes them great is that they have pressure settings. And the harder you press, you can set things up to do different things. So for instance, you can set this up so that the harder you press, the more opaque your brush becomes in Photoshop. Or the softer you press, the less opaque it becomes. So it really gives you that control that when you then paint with a very light stroke, you get a very light drop of ink. When you actually do a very hard stroke, you get a much harder. You can also you can set pressure up to control the size of your brush. So the harder you press, the bigger your brush is. The softer you press, the smaller it is. I don't do any of those settings here. This is now going to be universal for everything. I actually do those settings inside of Photoshop when I want to use them. If you're new to a graphics tablet, you don't want to get all tricky on this shit to begin with, because then stuff will start to happen and it will not happen the way you expect it to happen, and you'll just get frustrated with it and you won't use it. So my suggestion is that you don't do any of this shit here in this part, that if you want to explore those options, I will show you how to do them inside of Photoshop. So but anyway, but that's what it is right here. I'm going to set mine back to its default. There's also a thing called double tap distance. So everybody knows this. Look up at my screen really quickly just so that I can show you what this is really controlling. So I'm going to get rid of this part right here. So I've got a curriculum document right here. If I click on this once and then I pause and I click on it again, nothing happens. It just selected it on the first click and it reselected it on the second one. However, if I double click really quickly, it should actually launch. The time between the first click and the second click to actually launch this thing is what this setting is right here. How long between your first click and your second click will actually launch a file as opposed to select it twice. Again, the default in the middle is what I use. If you actually crank it all the way down to off, pretty much anything, no matter how much you double click or how quick or not quick you actually do it, it will actually launch your file. If you take it up to large, you've really got to have a time interval between the two for this thing to actually work. Again, I would leave it at your default to begin with. The next tab over at the very top is the mapping tab. If you click on this thing actually becomes important to us, and mine's actually not at its default. I'm going to change mine to be at its default. And what this is, there are two modes that you'll see here. One is for pen and the other is for mouse. There are versions of a Wacom tablet that you can get that have their own dedicated mouse. This would have no impact. This mouse has got no impact on a regular Apple mouse or a trackpad. But for a Wacom tablet that has a mouse, this is how you would configure it. In our case, we're just going to do it with the pen. But you can see what it's mapping right here. It's saying it's going to map the thing on the bottom, which is your tablet, to your screen, which is at the very top. And this is actually mapping full tablet to full screen. I have a problem with that. I don't like the way the bottom of this tablet works, and this is why I don't like it. When I'm working on the tablet itself, my hand is actually resting on the tablet, and that part's comfortable for me. But if I have to go down to the bottom edge of the tablet, my hand comes off the tablet and rests back on the desk, and this speed bump is really uncomfortable for me. I hate that part. So you can actually say you want to remap the tablet so that the bottom of the screen maps to something that's much higher on your tablet. And you can actually see this actually happen. So that's what I'm going to do on mine. You can actually come over here to your tablet. It used to be, so your tablet area, if we click on the drop-down tablet and go from full to proportion, it'll then allow you to remap the screen. And all I did was, you'll see my bottom right here is at 7,000 pixels, but you can actually move this stuff around. You can say, so for instance, there's a lot of people who do not like to travel a lot on their tablet, and you can really choke down your entire area. So you can grab all of these guys on the side and you can actually pull them in so that only this very central area of your tablet is actually live. And now this little bit of area in here is actually mapping to your entire screen. So it's a faster move. Now for me, I don't actually need to keep it like that, so I'm going to hit cancel out of here, and I'm going to then redo it. For me, I only boost up the bottom to get rid of this live area at the bottom of my tablet so that I never actually drop my hand off the screen. So for me, this is the bottom of my screen right here, even though it's well into my tablet. Is this making sense, everybody?
Yeah, it doesn't show any of this for some reason.
So there's your tablet right
See,
there.
But then, like,
Click on proportion.
it doesn't do anything for some reason.
Your
That's
screen.
empty. Do I need to reinstall?
So no, there's something weird going on, because the truth of the matter is, you don't really need to change this unless you're having that same weird behavior that
Yeah.
you hate. But let's look at this during, we can look at that also during the break, because that's really weird. Is everybody else able to remap their tablet? Okay, yeah, it may be a driver addition. So one thing I'll also say about Wacom tablets, they have 100 million drivers out there, and they're incredibly specific. So if you've got a driver that's installed on there from a different tablet, you can't then use the one that a new tablet that you've got. You've got to uninstall the original driver and put in a new one. You would think Wacom would figure out, just let's do one universal driver and work on all the tablets. That does not happen. They are absolutely the worst. They're right up there with X-Rite, who also does really shitty work. But nonetheless, you can also click on this to define tablet area. If you click on that button, it allows you to you can actually then look at your tablet and say, where do you want the top left-hand corner, the top right-hand corner, the bottom left, bottom right. So you can set all that part up. For me, again, I just boost up the bottom. That's the only thing that I do on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. The real advantage of this, though, is when you get into multiple screens. So if you click on this drop-down menu, you will see that you can do the same thing. You can choke down so that it does not map to your full screen. I'm not really sure why you would do that, but you can do that. But more importantly here, if you have multiple monitors, you can actually have your tablet, instead of it dealing with all of your monitors set up, you can actually have it specific to only one monitor monitor or specific only to the other or only one area of one monitor. There are people who actually do multiple monitors. A lot of times will have one dedicated just to Photoshop and another monitor that's actually reference files or other things, other resources that they're actually using, especially if they're trying to copy an image or something like that. They could have another program that's got an image that's up on it. And in that case, you don't want to, again, if your tablet is only mapping to one monitor, it's more finesse than if it's mapping to two monitors, which is a much larger area. Again, you just have better control on it. So it allows you to do all of those sorts of things. But in our case, this is the only way only thing I'm going to change mine. And then this on-screen controls, again, these, I don't ever use any of these things, so I don't really going to get into really talking about this part. There's no reason to go there, especially if you are brand new to these. You don't want to like turn on all the bells and whistles of all this, because your experience with a tablet will only frustrate you. I can promise you that part. Questions about this? Are we good? Okay. You can close all of that up. Yes? Can I do what?
The security settings, when I started tapping it.
Yeah. So what you're looking for here, first unlock this guy. Put in your username and password. Hopefully this stuff is sticky.
No, that's the right one.
Yeah.
Do I have to put the Gmail at the
I think it's email at the top instead of your Oasis ID.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. That's my password, I swear.
Aaron's having the same issue. Why don't we work on this when you during the break? Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Are there questions about any of this? Great. I'm going to do this in a little bit of reverse order. I need everybody really quickly. We'll actually go ahead and launch your Photoshop. By the way, Photoshop 24 has just released. Unlike all the stuff when I tell you I don't do the latest, greatest stuff in updates, that kind of stuff, typically I would stay at 23. That's where I have been for the last year. It's the version that before they really integrated a lot of AI into Photoshop. So I'm a little bit, I would keep that version. However, there's a likelihood that half of you have already upgraded to version 24 of Photoshop. So I'm going to upgrade. You can keep multiple versions of Photoshop on your computer. So that's not actually a problem. You can even run multiple versions at the same time. That's pretty heavy on the resources, so I don't really recommend doing that, but that's all a possibility. So anyway, I've upgraded to 24, so what you're going to see on my screen, there's not that much on there that's going to be all that different, but that's just the version that I'm on, just to sort of give you guys the heads up about that. Again, I'm not suggesting that you do it. There's nothing that we are going to do, I don't think, certainly not today, but I don't think at any point in this class that would demand version 24 unless they've done some really huge fundamental change thing. Again, I just upgraded this 2 days ago, so we'll see what goes on. But don't feel like you have to. If you've been working in 23, your screen hopefully is going to look identical to mine, so I'm not going to worry about that part. Okay, that being said, if I can get everyone to, there's some files that I want to start working with right off the bat. If you go to your class session number 2, so the stuff from last week, inside that class session number 2, there is a folder that is 20100-327_ver_woods_07. Can everybody find that folder? Take a look at my screen to see what I'm talking about. Can anybody tell me anything about this images inside this folder? You don't even look at them. Just tell me from looking at the name of the file or the folder. So again, we are in session class number 2 in your student files week number 2. Does everybody have this folder? Okay. So can you, just looking at it, what can you tell me about it? It's a raw file. Is that what I got? There is a raw file in there, that's true. Can anybody tell me when this pictures in there was shot? Yeah, can you be even more specific about that? Oh, so you had March 27th. That's really specific, right? Can you tell me who it was shot for?
Yourself?
Exactly, that's what the VER is. Can anybody give me any idea about subject content in here at all? All of you people know this shit just from the name. You haven't even looked at the file, other than there's a raw file in there, which I appreciate, but nonetheless, just throwing that out there. We talked about naming convention in this class, first class, right? Okay, just a thought. All right, now there are two files in here. Actually, there may be more in there. What I'm really just looking for are the raw files. So there are two CR2 files in here. There's also, in my case, do you guys have an XMP file in here? Yes? Get rid of the XMP file. And do you have a Photoshop file in there, a PSD file in there? Yeah? Oh, huh. You can get rid of that too. All I want is the two CR2 files. Yeah, if there's more than one XMP file, get rid of it all. If there's a DNG, get rid of that guy too. Okay. You need to select both of the CR2 files, both of the raw files, and then just open them. I hit Command O to open mine. They should bring you into Camera Raw. Both of them should come in. Now, some of you have had files that are loading in Capture One. Is that happening to anyone? Some people are actually going into Lightroom. It's launching Lightroom. And some people, it actually goes into Preview. Everybody get this to open in Photoshop? Okay, good. So, the question becomes, okay, I've got this color card in here that can do all sorts of things for me. It can make a color profile for me. It can do all of this stuff for me, but I don't want to have to put this color card in every single image I take and then have to retouch the card out. That would be a horrible thing to do. So to actually fix that part of it, we're not going to take the time out to make a custom profile of this, but if we did, we would simply click on this drop-down menu right here and change this to custom profile. And whatever that custom, again, I would actually either click on this and go down to browse, or click on the four little squares right here and go down to my custom profiles, and I would pick the custom profile for this shooting. I haven't made one yet though, so that part's not going to be possible. So if you've gone into the browse part right here, you need to go up to right underneath the histogram and click the back arrow to go back to the standard panel that's in here. Now, one of the things that drives me crazy about this stuff in a lot of classes here is that I'm going to show you a couple tricks in this about how to really develop in this part. So we're just going to go through this very briefly, but quickly nonetheless. The first move you really do want to make is to white balance this. So if you click on the little eyedropper that's right next to white balance, if you click on that and you come over onto your image, you might be able to actually hit the patch, the gray patch that's right next to the red patch. So that's the one I always target for. The reason I do not use the white balance tool on the white patch is that basically when you do color correction, it puts a curve on this thing to actually do the color correction. And if you click on the white patch, the point of the curve that it actually picks to do the correction is incredibly close to the top highlight parts of your curve. If you imagine a curve, here, look at you won't see this on the screen, but you'll hear it at least on the video. If we think about a typical curve that you use, just a curve that you use in Photoshop, it actually starts out the thing that's in the properties panel, and it looks like this, right? And this is 0, 0, 0, this is black down here, and this is 255, 255 right up here. If you want real flexibility in doing your color correction, if you do change your curve starting at a point right here, you can move it and you get this big arc. You've got a lot of room to do a lot of adjustment. However, if you instead pick a point that's right up here, this is the only adjustment that you can make is that. I mean, it's like nothing in there. It's like really, really tiny. You don't have a whole lot of room. Well, this point up here is the equivalent of picking the white patch. This point in the middle is the equivalent of picking the gray patch that's right next to the red. So picking that gray patch, you just have much more flexibility in it. people avoid the darker patches as well, although Photoshop does a pretty good job of it, but they avoid the darker ones primarily because color casting you see in what they call the quarter tones, the highlights. You see it in the upper parts of it. You don't pick up color casting in shadows because they're too dark. You can see a little bit, but you will really spot if something's got a pink cast or a blue cast or whatever, you see that up in the lighter tones, not in the darker tones. So at any rate, I pick on this guy. However, that's a small target to hit, and I want to make sure I don't miss it. So if you hold down your space bar and the command key, no matter what tool you've got going on in Camera Raw, this also happens in Photoshop, you get the plus magnifying glass. If you add the option key to that, you will get the -1, or you should, but I'm not getting the -1, so wow. So this is why you don't upgrade, because the version of Camera Raw right before this actually had keyboard controls that have worked for, I don't know, 30 years. Why not just change that? Anyway, for us, it's just plus. So hold down spacebar command, or you can click on this little drop-down menu here to actually zoom in. I just want to zoom in so I can hit that target better. So what is happening to me that I've also found is that when you have the white balance tool selected and you do that keyboard shortcut to zoom in, a lot of times, like it's happening to me right now, when I come back onto my screen, I get this minus magnifying glass. You have to select the little eyedropper tool repeatedly to get it back again. But then I've got a big target that I can select on, and you can simply click on it, and it will actually do the white balance. And you see it pumps in an enormous amount of warmth into this. You can also drag this around. You'll see if you click and drag out, then instead of getting a white balance based on a single pixel, it will actually do a white balance based on the average of that selection. It's a little bit safer to do that because you can have an important pixel that sits in there. If you hit what they call either a dead pixel or a hot pixel, it can pervert your color balance. If you do the click and drag version, it's going to select a large number of pixels and white balance the average of that. It's just a little bit safer to actually do. A couple of other things that we need to do while we're here. While I am here and zoomed in, I am going to hover my cursor over the white balance, over the white patch, and I'm going to take a look at my white readout right here. And you can see I'm getting a 235, a 235, a 232. What is that telling me? I'm sorry, what? Oh, well, if it was the right numbers, it would be perfect exposure. Are those the right numbers? I'm a little bit under, right? What should those numbers actually be?
Somewhere between 245 and 250.
Exactly. So it's between 245 and 250. I can actually get there, but I don't want to keep hovering over here and coming back and changing stuff and coming back, all that. The easier thing to do is to look at the toolbar on the far right-hand side towards the bottom. There's an eyedropper tool there with a little icon right next to it. It's a fixed, it'll actually give us a fixed readout. If you click on that tool and then drag it over, just come over to this white patch and click once. Click. And come over here and click once, you will get a readout that sits up at the very top, and it's a permanent readout, and it says the 235, 235, 235 in this case, in my case right here. So that's telling me what the readout on this white patch is. However, I'm not done yet. So a lot of people think that you can use the black patch on these color cards as well. You cannot. Do not go after the black patch. This is not legitimate shadow detail. Looking at my image, where do I have legitimate shadow detail? Where do I have detail that I really want to see? So if we take a look at her shorts, clearly there should be detail in that. And what is our shadow detail value that we are looking for? Mid-20s. I always shoot around 25. That's what I'm really looking for here. However, these shorts are in full daylight. This is not shadow detail. This should be above shadow detail. We need to really look around here to find out what I would consider to be real shadow detail. So I'm actually looking around in here. I would say that possibly the reflection of the boots underneath the, on the mirror part in here. So it's a couple things. They're black boots to begin with, but they're also being, even though I get the reflection of it, the boots themselves are subtracting light from what's underneath here as well. I would say that that's probably probably a legitimate target for shadow detail. If I take a look, I'm just looking around here for other places, possibly the waistband in the reflection in the mirror would also be a candidate for that. Possibly the area that's sitting under here, the sort of the reflection of her arm would be another possible shadow detail spot. And, so if we zoom in even further on the shorts, so I'm really going to crank in now. If we take a look at this part right in here, possibly this area of her pocket in here, if I take a look at that, that's another candidate for it. You can throw down another point right there, and you can see it's already in the mid-20s or extremely close to that. But this is giving me the information that I need to do the correct exposure of this file. And so I can see right now that I need to actually bump the highlights. I'm simply going to grab my overall exposure on software, and I'm going to start to pop it up, and I'm looking for that readout, and I want to see this thing get to that 245. Right now, I pump my exposure up like a 0.45 stops in exposure, and that gives me my white readout point that I'm looking for. That also pulls my shadow detail slightly up. It's not anywhere near as much as the highlight part of it, but that's fine because it also brings me into the mid-20s. It was close to the mid-20s. There wasn't that big of a shift in there, but this is now properly exposed based on what I want on all of this. So that's the beginning of all of this. But what I would suggest that you guys do, and nobody seems to do this, but what does Photoshop think I should do? So I'm going to zip back out to my 100 zoom control here, and I'm going to go up to the very top under the Instagram, whatever. There's an auto button up there. Hit the auto button and just see what Photoshop says. Now in Photoshop's case, they actually say that they think my exposure correction should only be a 0.18, and I'm looking at that going, okay, well that may be fine for you, whatever, but I hate what it's actually done to this file. It's dropped my blacks down too far, so I've lost my shadow detail that's right under that pocket. You can see I'm now in the 20s. That's no longer shadow detail I can work with. It's really stomped on the brightness part of it. It's probably trying to recover the reflections and the highlights of the sky in the mirror. That's what it's really going for. But that's not what's important to me. What's important to me is the figures, the image. This is a fashion shot. It's not a mirror shot. Make sense? So in this case, I disagree with what Photoshop says. However, some of the things that you could consider in this is that you don't have to accept all the suggestions that Photoshop's making. So instead, I can go back to what I thought it should be. I'm actually going to grab my exposure and crank it back up to that 0.45. You don't have to keep what Photoshop actually says in here, but you can still see I'm only up in the 219s. It's really stepped on this thing hard. So I can look at it and say, well, what's Photoshop trying to do? Well, it's trying to pull down my shadow, my highlights. It's trying to open up my shadows. It's trying to push everything to the middle. And that's not necessarily the image that I want. If you look at those shorts now, they're really flat. They have lost all sorts of, so for me, I don't like this part. If you click on the auto button again, it will actually undo all of that work. It should undo all of that work. In my case, it's not undone any of that work. So to get back to undo all of this stuff very quickly, go to the little 3 dots that are on the toolbar on the right-hand side, sort of at the bottom in the middle. Click on the drop down and come back down to reset to default. It should erase everything that we've done, including the white balance. So I'm going to reset my white balance by clicking on the white balance slider. I'm going to click on that. I'm actually going to then look at my readouts, and I am going to push my exposure up slightly. I may not go all the way up, but I'm going to go up like a third of a stop. I like the way that part looks better. Then working our way down the rest of this, I can leave the rest of it until we get down to texture clarity and dehaze. Clarity is the major player here and the one that you want to work with. Clarity is a contrast move, but it's restricted to midtones. The problem in using the contrast slider up at the very top is the contrast slider hits everybody. So anything that's close to white will get blown out to white. Anything that's close to black will get buried to black. But if you use the clarity slider, it respects the white point and the black point. It does not move those, but it increases the contrast in the midtones, and everybody can use a little clarity. So I'm going to click on my clarity slider. I'm looking specifically at her hair, her skin tone, and those shorts. I did a clarity move of 28, and it is a game changer. You guys are putting in really, really, really dull images. They need some contrast. Almost every image in the world needs a little bit of clarity. Vibrance is different than saturation. We talked about this last week. What vibrance will actually do is colors that are already saturated, it tends to stay away from those. Colors that are not saturated, it tends to saturate them. So watch what happens when I do a vibrance move. I'm going to click on the vibrance move, and I'm going to push it up, and look at what's happening to my gray card right here. It's changing primarily those blue tones that are right in here because they're not that saturated, but the red, green, and yellows that are already completely saturated, it's not having any impact on those guys at all, or whatever impact it's having is very, very little, very diminished. If you double click on any slider, it'll zero back out. If you go up there to the saturation now, that's a different animal altogether. The saturation slider hits everybody, and it saturates everybody. Now, there may be cases for this, but it's certainly not this image. So I'm going to back off on that. And frankly, I don't really like my images that saturated, so I'm going to leave off the vibrance part as well. And so this is how I would want to begin to process my image. If you click on the Fit to View slider, which is the button at the very lower left-hand corner, and you click on that, you'll see your entire image. If you actually then click on the other right-hand side underneath your viewer, what you're looking at right here, you can have a before and after button. This will show you the changes that you've actually made. Now, you also need to make sure that you had your preferences set up to actually apply chromatic aberration correction and to apply the lens profile of this to eliminate any of the vignetting. To make sure that's happened in this case, hopefully you've already got it set up to be the case always on yours, but if you want to check to make sure, come down to your optics panel, click to open this up. In an optics panel, you should have this remove chromatic aberration selected and use profile correction. If we uncheck profile correction, you'll actually see the problem with this image. Again, this is a great one to see what's really happening. This image suffers from barrel distortion. It means that the center of the image appears to be projecting out of the screen to me, while the edges of the pictures appear to be receding in the background. So you can see that motion. Also, the edges on this was actually shot with if you click on manual, it used to show you, it's not going to show us anymore, it used to show you what lens you actually have on here. It's picking up the lens from the metadata in here, so it knows what lens this actually is. This is not a really wide angle lens. This is a 24 to 70 that's probably set somewhere in between around 35 millimeters, 32. Hey, can I guess or what? Wide angle lenses tend to have, the biggest problem you have with wide angle lenses is they tend to vignette. And the reason that they vignette is that there is the way light is actually entering the lens, the stuff that's coming in the front doesn't have anywhere near as far to travel to the sensor is the light that's coming in from the edges. So by the mere fact that there's fall off from those edges that come in, now lens designers try to make corrections for that, but again, unless you're spending a fortune on really expensive glass, this is always going to be the case. So this is something that I would want to actually have. So I'm going to keep that profile correction that's actually on there. So this guy's looking right to me in as much as I want to process this now in Photoshop. However, that's not what's going on with the one that's right underneath it. If you click on the one that's underneath it, it doesn't have any of those things applied to it. So you want to go back up to the one that you're working on that's actually got the card in it. This is now going to be our reference image. And what we want to do is we want to basically copy all the settings that we did on this guy to the image that's underneath it, because the image that's underneath it is the one that I want to bring into Photoshop and actually work on. This is not, the one with the card is not the one I want to work on. So to do that, if you actually look up at the very, cover over the thumbnail of your image, if you've still got your thumbnails that run along the bottom, that's fine, it'll be in the same place. If you hover over the thumbnail, you will actually see at the top, you get two icons that show up. There's three little dots, and then there's a square with an arrow pointing down. The square with the arrow pointing down is the same as the one that's at the very top above the histogram. It'll actually generate a DNG for you. What we care about, though, are the three dots. If you click on the three dots, you will see that a window flies open, and it allows you to do a select all. What it's talking about is not selecting all of the image, it's talking about selecting all the thumbnails. So I'm going to do a select all, and you'll see now what happens is that a thinner white line has gone around the image that's on the bottom. I've still got the thick line that's on the very top that's showing me that that's the image that I'm actually editing, but the one on the bottom now is also selected. So it's a two-step move. You go back to that exact same three little dots on the top of the thumbnail, you click on that and you come down and you click on Sync Settings. A dialog box will actually open up, and there's a preset in the dialog box. There's a series of presets. If you look at the subset drop-down menu, you will see that you can say, okay, I want you to sync everything. So if we'd gone in, if we'd cropped this image, if we'd done all sorts of things in this image, whatever, it would actually show, we would be adding that part to it. In my case, I can leave this at the default because the only thing that we've really done in this was work in the basic panel and then white balancing here, which they are also including in the basic panel. If you click the drop-down menu for this and open it up, you'll see these are all the settings that are actually being applied to this. Now, all we have done in here is we've changed our exposure, we've actually changed the clarity, and we've also done a white balance on here. All of those are all checked in here, so we are good to go. You don't need to worry about any of the others because we haven't done anything in the others. But if you had, you can turn this stuff on and off, depending on what you want to apply. By default, the ones that you want to try to generally avoid in doing here in a gang setting like this would be cropping. A lot of times also dust, if you've got dust on your sensor, depending on when you shot it. A lot of dust on sensors doesn't move during the shooting, and so it'll be in the same spot every time. So if you actually remove dust here in Camera Raw, you can sync that setting and you can effectively try to gang a sensor spot that's actually in every single one of your images, and you don't have to do it by yourself. Certainly if you were doing weddings and that kind of stuff where you've got hundreds of images that you want to process, you would want to explore that part because otherwise you got to go in and do it one at a time in Photoshop. You'll hate your life. So anyway, in this case, it's fine. I'm simply going to say OK. And now all of those same settings have been applied to this other image. And I would then look at this other image and I would make my choices about this other image. So for instance, I'm hovering over this area right where her butt's touching this, the mirror, just to check to say, is this in my shadow detail range here? And I'm looking at my histogram and yeah, that's in the 30s. We're good to go here. I would also, if you look at your histogram here, you have warnings about clipping. So if you click on so what I'm looking at is the histogram at the very top left-hand corner. It looks like it's not really a triangle, it's more like kind of a pyramid-y kind of shape thing. Anyway, if you click on that guy, what this will do is it will flag any image, any part of your image that has actually gone to 000, to black. And it flags it with a blue color, and you can actually see right underneath her butt that there is actually part of that's actually happened here. This is now actually dropped down to 000. This would be unprintable detail in here by far. You can do the same thing with the highlights. If you click on the opposite one on the top right-hand side of the histogram, this will actually flag anything that's actually in red. It'll then show you. To see what I mean by this, you don't need to do this, but look what happens. I'm going to overdrive my exposure so that you really see it. And you can see now all these areas in red have been driven to unprintable white, page white in here. So it's just a warning to actually do that part, to show you what's actually been done in here. So my warnings are fine. I don't need those guys anymore. However, at this stage of the game, this is the only file that I need to actually open up in Photoshop, and then I would simply click on Open Object, and I would be good to go. Questions about this? You can sync hundreds of files. Anything you actually have open, there's no limit to that thumbnail part. Are we good on this part? Okay, as long as you guys have this thing open, which everybody does, terrific. I want to actually blur this image, so I'm going to come up to the filter and I'm going to come down to blur, and I'm going to come down to Gaussian blur, and you'll see that you actually can do a Gaussian blur on this guy. However, so I want everybody go ahead and hit Gaussian blur on this, and a dialog box will open up and it'll say, well, how much do you want to blur this guy? And I'm really going to whack this. So crank your blur up to like 50, and go ahead and say OK to this. This is another advantage to using smart objects. So what you will see now that has happened is that it has not just blurred the image, which would be typical if this was just a baked image and not a smart object. But because this is a smart object and it is in that protective envelope, you cannot destroy this image. This is a non-destructive, the ability to do this is non-destructive. So look what you actually get. You actually get what they call a smart filter. If you take a look at your smart filter, you will see two things. The first one on the very top is a mask. So you can actually use a mask to control where this filter shows up. The second one is actually an eyeball of the filter that you actually used on this guy, and it is the Gaussian blur. So if you click on the eyeball for the Gaussian blur, you will see that it was a non-destructive move on your image. Isn't that great? If you click on it again, it brings it back on. But even if you save this file and close it and then open it back up, these smart filters will be right here and in place. And if you double click on the word that says Gaussian blur, it pulls you right back into the dialog and allows you to readjust this. So let's say that you realized once you printed it out or looked at it on a different monitor, that blur was way too much, that, oh my God, no, it was way too much, or it wasn't enough. So now crank your blur up to 100. And we'll say okay to that, and then you're thinking, Jesus, that's blurry, right? But now hit the B key to get a brush. The minute you hit any key for a tool, the B key is a brush, you need to immediately go up and look at the options bar that sits at the very top. These things are really important to us, and you will hear me talk about them all the time. The first one to do is click on the thing. There's a little number up here. In my case, it says 150. Your number may be different. It doesn't matter. But I'm going to click on this drop-down menu. This is where you can control the size and the hardness of your brush. So in the size and hardness of this part right here, you can actually make your brush larger. So I'm going to click mine up to 250, and you'll see it gets even bigger. I'm going to go up to 500, it gets bigger. I use the bracket keys, which are just to the right of the P key, to control my brush size. I don't do it here. I avoid a whole trip to this. Hardness is a different issue though. So the hardness of your brush has to do with how the edge of your brush is. If you have 0 hardness, you have a very soft brush. If you have 100% hard brush, you have a very, very, very hard edge to your brush. It doesn't ramp off. It doesn't fade off. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and select your hardness all the way up to 100. Then if you look next to this, we need to get rid of this drop-down menu. The problem is that if I come over here and I click on my image to get that drop-down menu to collapse again, you will actually make a mark on your image, and you do not want to do that. That's not what I want to do. I want to get rid of this thing and then get prepared to do the marks that I want to make. Yes?
It says my smart object must be rasterized.
Just say no.
Say cancel.
Cancel.
And then it won't let me
An error.
So when did that happen?
after I did the Gaussian blur.
Oh, okay, then if that's happening on here, click on the, so if we take a look at this right now, you've actually got, if you take a look at, there's a series of white brackets that are actually around the smart object. That white brackets always shows you what you're actually painting on. So if we've got an image, it would be painting on that image, and you can't paint on a smart object. However, you can, if we had a mask on this, a regular visibility mask on this, if you clicked on that, the little white brackets would go to the mask, and then you could paint on that part. In our case, click on the smart object mask, the smart filter mask, so that we can paint on that, and then try to do your brush again. Hit the B key. Did he give you one? No? Hang on. All right, so you got the smart filter part. That's great. We've got 2 Gaussian blurs in here. We're going to get rid of one of them because instead of doing, you just did a second one. So instead of, if you double click on this, it allows you to adjust it again.
Okay,
if you go up to filter and come down again, it'll hit it a second time.
Gotcha.
All right, so I'm going to just click on the mask, hit the B key right now. It has selected brush, and it is the brush tool.
Oh,
And
okay.
there you go, and you can make it larger and smaller. This is the drop-down menu right here. Your brush is 100% hard. So you're in the same plot I'm in.
So-
Don't hit there yet.
Okay.
Okay? So The trick to not hitting something on your image that you don't want on your image, sorry. Only half of you people could see. So what I want to work on is the mask for the filter. So this is now, this mask down here is not one for the image, it's actually one for the filter. So again, back up to this top, I've got this drop-down menu. I want to get rid of this without making a mark on this. Simply click on the word Adobe. And I do this all the time. It will get rid of anything that is actually opened up without making a mark on your image. And it doesn't change your image, it doesn't move your image, it doesn't do anything. It's just a safety place to click. The next thing you need to check is the blending mode of your brush. We use blending modes. We're actually going to use them in this class quite a bit. Make sure that it's set to normal. The opacity is set to 100% and the flow is set to 100%. Smoothing here, we'll talk about smoothing later on. You can leave this at 10%. That's the default on here. But now I can actually work with this brush. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. Again, I'm just using the second of the bracket keys next to the P key, the one that's to the far right of it, just to make my brush larger. Check your foreground and background colors right now. This mask that I've got is white. If I paint with white on a white mask, it doesn't change anything. I want to paint with black on this mask to hide that blur in certain areas. To do that, hit the X key and it will flip your foreground and background colors. I've now got black as my foreground color, and now when I paint with it, you can see it actually hides the blur of that smart filter from the area that I just painted on that mask. Does that make sense to everyone? So how many of you guys knew that you could actually paint a filter? Great. To see this even better, make sure that the brackets are around your layer mask right here. There's two keyboard shortcuts that I use all the time. One is to fill your, whatever you've got selected with your foreground color. The other is to fill it with your background color. So this is the way to remember this part. The shortcuts are the same, just remember this part of it. If you look at your, yes? It's this right down here. Foreground, background color?
Mine just says gray.
It says what?
Mine is gray.
Then hit, if yours is gray, then hit the D key by itself. It will default your foreground and background colors to black and white.
Oh, okay.
You good?
I'm just making sure.
Yep. Nope, you're good, you're good. If you can't remember the D key trick, see the really baby little icon above it that's supposed to represent foreground and background colors? If you click on that, it does the same thing. It defaults them to black and white. Okay, so I want to actually fill this whole area with black. I want to create a black mask on this smart filter mask. To do that, if you hold down the, if you take a look at your keyboard, take a look at the space bar, the key just to the left of the space bar, in our case it's the command key on Windows, I think it's the control key. If you hold that key down and hit, again, and for Macintosh it's delete, for Windows it's backspace, I think. If you hit that keyboard combination, it will fill with your background color. So again, the keys, the command key, the one that's just to the left of the space bar, and the one that is just to the left of that, represent foreground, background color, no matter what they are. So in my case, the holding down the command key and hitting delete is the background color, because that's the one that's closest to my space bar. The one that's next to it, in our case it is the option key. If you hit option delete, it will fill it with the foreground color. If you hit the X key and you flip those, it's now going to do just the opposite. My foreground color is now white, but again, the keyboard shortcut is the same. The option key, the second one from the left of your space bar plus delete, fills it with your foreground color always, no matter what that foreground color is. The command key, the one that, so if you think about the two foreground and background colors as being left to right, the one that's on the farthest to the right, the background color, will always be the one closest to your spacebar. The foreground color, the one that's actually just next to it, will always be your foreground color. Make sense? So regardless of what yours is, I want you to fill this space with black. Black is now my background color, so it is Command or Control Delete. I've got it now in my background color. Hit the B key again to get to your brush. White is now my foreground color, so now I can actually start to paint blur in. Now I'm actually painting with a filter. And you can do this with any filter there is. Make sense? You cannot just stay there. We are actually, you look at this and you say, well, you use that hard brush, it's way too hard in here. You can run all of your controls on this mask as well. So I've still got my layer mask selected. I'm going to blur my mask. Up to filter, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. And my 100 Gaussian blur just really softens up the edges. You can see it happen. And again, this is another reason that I use those large thumbnails. I can actually see this happening in my thumbnail. Look at the blur that you can actually see right there. If I turn off my preview, you'll see that the blur on in the mask itself gets really hard again, and so does the image. If I turn this guy back on again, it's actually, I see the effect on the image, but I also see it in the layer in the Smart Filter mask. Make sense? Questions about any of this? All right, guys, I'm going to call this 2:30. Let's do a hard 10 minutes, and I'll see you guys when you get back.